Hello, BookTube. Today we're going to continue on with Bookcase 3, this time Shelf 2, the first part. And once again, it's maritime books. And we're going to start off with a book that is, in some ways, related to a book we saw on the first shelf. And that was that sort of sad and disturbing book, The Strange Last Voyage of Donald Crowhurst, the fellow who was in the first around the world single-handed nonstop race. He was falsifying his position reports and maybe some of his log, if I remember correct. They found the boat. They never found him, and it's like I say, it's an important read if you're a sailor and you like maritime stuff, but it's disturbing. Well, the fellow who won that race, is Robin Knox Johnson, and he, as I said, I carried the Crowhurst paperback around for years. I did the same with Robin Knox Johnson account of his voyage, and he did it and he won, and he's a heck of a sailor. And I don't have that book anymore, and I haven't seen it in years, and I'd love to run into it. But I do have his book on seamanship, which is something he would know about. This, I'll just read from the inside flap. The man Minnie judged the finest seaman alive has put his knowledge into a compact manual of vast value to any boat owner. Robin Knox Johnson was the first man to sail single-handed non-stop around the world. He has sailed and raced all his life over the oceans of the world. What he has learned, he has put into this invaluable manual. Unlike other books on seamanship, this one is designed for onboard use as well as on-land study. It is compact enough for a boat storage, yet it contains all the yachtsman needs to know about boat handling, steering, maneuvering under sail, maneuvering under power, towing, skills, stability and buoyancy, safety equipment, mooring and anchoring, ropes, knots, and tackles, or as they used to say in the old days, tackles. Sails, spars and rigs, communications, meteorology, maintenance, ship and boat, water and food. So here's the inside, sort of attractive with the signal flags. Same on the other side. It's this book was published by W. Norton Company, New York and London, and it's 1986. This is the first American edition. So if you want to learn how to splice a line, seizing, parts of a tackle or tackle, various knots. Let's get out of that stuff. I just happen to really like that stuff. Grounding alongside a quay. So, yeah, I could look at this all day. This is a wonderful book. So moving right along, we'll get a little bit of history here. Storm and Conquest: A Clash of Empire in the Eastern Seas, 1809, by Stephen Taylor. I read this a couple years ago and really, really enjoyed it. Good history. Let me see if they got a picture of Mr. Taylor. His most recent work when this was put out was Caliban Shore. He works for the Times of London and lives in Windsor. Very nice book. So it was published by W. Norton and Company, New York and London again, 2007, and this is the first American edition of 2008. Admiral Sir Edward Pilo, simply the greatest sea officer of his time, according to contemporary authority. Captain Pilo, and then in color we'll see Lieutenant General Hay McDowell. So some nice color illustrations that you can see. The Indian Ocean was the final battleground for Nelson's navy and for France. At stake was Britain's commercial lifeline to India and its strategic capacity to wage war in Europe. In one fatal season, the natural order of maritime power since Trafalgar was destroyed. In bringing home Bengali saltpeter for the Peninsular Campaign with military and civilian passengers, Britain lost 14 of her great Indiamen, either sunk or taken by enemy frigates. Many hundreds of lives were lost, and the East India Company was shaken to its foundation. The focus of these disasters, military and meteorological, was a tiny French outpost in the mid-ocean, the island known as Mauritius. This is the story of that season. It brings together the terrifying ordeal of men, women, and children caught at sea in hurricanes, and those who survived to take up the battle to drive the French from the eastern seas. Mauritius must be taken at any cost. Now, those of you who have read Patrick O'Brian will remember Mauritius. So, this next novel, Voyage of the North Star by Peter Nichols. There's Mr. Nichols. This was a good read. He previously wrote a memoir, Sea Change, Alone Across the Atlantic in a Wooden Boat, and I used to read him for years in Wooden Boat magazine. I don't know if he still does that. Right here we have a nice little map. These types of novels and histories, the maritime ones, I always like it if they have something like the map, something that can help you while you're reading. So there's two little quotes. One's from Joseph Conrad and one's from Thoreau. So this is a powerfully wrought tale of reckless men and of desperate dreams, of perilous Arctic adventure and a savage clash of cultures on the uncharted tundra. It's 1932. America is marching headlong into the Depression. Unemployment is rife. Reds are protesting in the city streets. Soup kitchens ladle out small hope, and prohibitionists have watered down the beer. The rich are meanwhile getting richer, and the poor more bitter. In this boldly conceived novel that crosses the path of two men from opposite ends of New York's social spectrum. Carl Schenck is an unscrupulous industrialist and aspiring big game hunter who's come to bear a striking resemblance to his schoolboy hero Teddy Roosevelt. Has amassed a fortune fabulous enough to fashion a world that caters to his whims, whereas Will Bowden, a seaman down on his luck, has lost his boat, his wife, his job, his reputation. Second chances don't come easily to a man like Bowden, a captain who abandoned his own ship until Schnenk's blind resolve to launch an Arctic safari offers him an opportunity to do what no seasoned seaman would. Casting aside sound judgment and his soul's foreboding, Bowden signs on with the Lodestar, a yacht luxuriously appointed for Schnenk's pleasure, but woefully ill-equipped to navigate the icy seas as farthest north. Quite an adventure. It's a good book. Then something on the byway here. Guy R. Williams, The World of Model Ships and Boats. It's exactly what it says as it is. I'm not going to go into great detail about it, but it's Chartwell Books Incorporated. It was published in an arrangement with G.P. Putnam Sons in New York. It's from 1971. Give you an idea of some of the models. It's a whole separate world, this maritime modeling stuff. I love looking at what people can do and how creative they are. I'm not like that. So there's that. And this was basically mine from my Coast Guard years. This is a standard for people who do that sort of thing for a living and for those who sail. Heavy Weather Sailing by K. Allard Coles. It's Adlard Coles Limited. Granada Publishing Limited. First published in Britain in 1967. This is a fourth impression of 1973. There's a sailboat and heavy weather. It's a pretty technical treatise about weather, waves, everything in between here. There he is. So, it's like I say, it's a standard work for somebody who's going to find himself in those situations. It's wonderful. I've had a copy for probably 30 years. I don't know. So the next one here is another history. It's Ghosts of Cape Sabine, the harrowing true story of the Greeley expedition by Leonard F. Guttridge. Get my hands out of the way in there. And there's Mr. Guttridge on the back here. Nice end papers. Make sure you can see it there. I really enjoyed this. So, 25 men went north, only 6 returned alive. In July 1881, an expedition composed mainly of American soldiers sailed off to establish a scientific base in the remote Arctic region of Lady Franklin Bay. What happened afterwards was a remarkable 3-year saga of human achievement and human frailty, of heroism, hardship, bad luck, and worse judgment, compounded by deliberate political negligence back home, especially on the part of Secretary of War Robert Todd Lincoln, son of the late president, and increasingly fierce dissension in its own camp. The expedition's fate and that of its would-be rescuers eventually encompassed starvation, mutiny, suicide, shipwreck, execution, and cannibalism. So, quite a story. Then I get to a standard history that sort of one of those landmark volumes. I've got it in paper. N.A.M. Roger, The Safeguard of the Sea, A Naval History of Britain from 660 to 1649. This is a great, great book. The copyright was 1997, the first American edition 98. The first published as a Norton paperback in 99. This looks like it might be that first. Throughout the chronicle of Britain's history, one factor above all others has determined the fate of the kings, the security of trade, and the integrity of the realm. Without its navy, Britain would have been a weakling among the nations of Europe, could never have built or maintained the empire, and in all likelihood have been overrun by the armies of Napoleon and Hitler. So, N.A.M. Roger is Anderson Fellow of the National Maritime Museum in Greenwich, England, and the author of The Wooden World, A History of the British Navy in the 18th century. This is, if you're into maritime history, this is quite a book. Another one is one of those volumes that I've had for years. This is Richard Henderson, Single-Handed Sailing. This is the second edition. The Experiences and Techniques of Lone Voyagers. Another really one of the standards for folks. International Marine Publishing Company, Camden, Maine. Did some wonderful books. This one here was from 1988. So it was originally published in 1976 by International Marine. And the second edition is an updated thing. It offers penetrating insights into the psychology of single-handers, their vessels, gear, strategies, and techniques, plus vivid accounts of emergency experiences alone against the element. So here you have a drogue or sea anchor. Let's see here. I've always been, here. Tristan Jones, I've read a lot of his books. He's a bit controversial, or was. picture of him there, but he was very neat. So this is a good book. Here's we were just talking about Robin Knox Johnson, who was the only competitor of the 1968 Golden Globe race to make it back in the starting point. We just talked about him. So, good book. Then we have another history. Caroline Alexander, the author of the New York Times bestseller The Endurance. Here is The Bounty, the true story of mutiny on the Bounty. She lives across the river here in New Hampshire from me. A little farm, I believe. So, a retelling, a re-exploration of the history of the mutiny on the Bounty. Good book. Then we have a couple of one of my favorite guys, Nathaniel Philbrook, The Heart of the Sea, or It's in the Heart of the Sea. I should give it its proper title. It's Mr. Philbrook. It's the tragedy of the whale ship Essex. This is a Viking, and it's from 2000, and this was the 21st printing. It was a very popular book, and it's been made into a movie. I didn't see the movie, which is not unusual with me. So nice maps. Good story. Good story. And then finally is another Nathaniel Philbrook. This one, signed copy. And I found this just as fascinating. Sea of Glory, America's Voyage of Discovery, the U.S. Exploring Expedition of 1838 and 1842. And I volunteered and was an archival intern at a maritime museum where we had the volumes from that expedition. Quite neat to look at because I was reading this at the time. So the America's first frontier was not the West, it was the sea. And no one writes more eloquently about that watery wilderness than Nathaniel Philbrook. The U.S. Exploring Expedition of 1838 to 1842 was one of the most ambitious undertakings of the 19th century and one of the largest voyages of discovery the Western world had ever seen. 6 magnificent sailing vessels and a crew of hundreds that include botanists, geologists, mapmakers, and biologists, all under the command of the young, brash Lieutenant Charles Wilkes. Their goal was to cover the Pacific Ocean top to bottom and to plant the American flag around the world. 4 years after embarking, they returned to the United States, having accomplished this and much more. They discovered a new southern continent, which Wilkes would name Antarctica. Wonder what it looked like then compared to now. They were the first Americans to survey the treacherous Columbia River, and that it is, and the first to chart dozens of newly discovered islands all across the Pacific. They explored volcanoes in Hawaii, confirmed Charles Darwin's theory for the formation of coral atolls, and collected thousands of specimens that eventually became the foundation of the Smithsonian Scientific Collection. So it's a fascinating story. It's a complex story, and Philbrook does a wonderful job. So I would strongly recommend it if that's your sort of thing. So there's the third bookcase, second shelf, the first part of it. And thank you, BookTube.